Good evening. You may ask, if the communists are such a danger to our society, why did we work with Lim and his communist friends in one anti-colonial united front? These and other questions have to be answered. However uncomfortable the truth may be to me and my colleagues, you must know it. I have told you how in 1953 we came to make our first communist contact with Lanias. 1953 was a time when the British, in fighting the communist insurrection, also suppressed all nationalists who attacked them. The result was that all those who were anti-British either kept quiet or quietly threw in their lot with the communist underground to down the British. So in the open constitutional arena, there were no lawful political parties of any significance with people capable or willing to lead the anti-colonial fight. There were the mild and feeble political parties like the Progressive Party, the Labour Party, and a whole host of funny ones, clowns and crooks passed off as leaders of the people. Emotionally, we were more in sympathy with the communists who were sacrificing their life and limb to down the British and get them out of the country than we were with these comic and crooked men. Lanias himself did not originally start off as a communist. He started as a nationalist. Slowly over the years, he drifted more and more with the men who were fiercely fighting the British. They happened to be communists, and he joined them. In this same way, we also drifted into the same communist company as Lanias had done. Lanias was anti-British as strongly as we were. We knew he wanted to establish an independent communist Malaya, and he knew we wanted to establish an independent democratic Malaya. But neither of our two different objectives would ever come to anything as long as the British were here. First, we had to get rid of the British to get independence. That was a common objective. We came to the conclusion that we had better forget our differences in the ultimate objectives and work together for our immediate common objective, the destruction of the British. Whether you wanted a democratic Malaya or a communist Malaya, you first had to get rid of the British. This broad anti-colonial united front was an inevitable phase in the history of our struggle for freedom. Before India got her independence, there was a time when Nehru and the Communist Party of India formed a united front against the British to fight for independence. At a time when the colonial ruler made no distinction between the communists and the non-communists who opposed him, it was only logical and indeed inevitable that both the communists and the non-communists should come together to achieve their common objective. But we never forgot that once the British were out of the way, there would be trouble between us and the communists as to what kind of Malaya we wanted to have in place of the old British colonial Malaya. We were quite clear as to what we wanted: an independent, democratic, socialist Malaya, which by democratic means could bring about a more just and equal society. On the other hand, they wanted a communist Malaya. This is what the communists mean when they say seeking concord whilst maintaining differences. They know the differences between our ultimate objective and theirs. But they say, let's not argue about these differences. Let's seek concord on the common objective of fixing the British. And on that we agreed. We have now fallen out because we have disagreed on our next objective. We want merger and independence. The communists do not. They have a vested interest in continuing the anti-colonial struggle, so that under cover of anti-colonialism, they can advance communism. They want the anti-colonial struggle to go on and on, meanwhile using British colonial Singapore as a base from which to undermine Malaya. The second question you may ask is, now that we know Lim and his friends are up to no good, why don't we take immediate steps to deal sternly with them? The answer is, because if we take immediate steps to deal sternly with them, we shall lose the open argument of who is right and who is wrong. This is a battle for the minds of the people, for the people's support for what we believe is right for the country. We must convince you, the people, that what we propose, independence through merger with the Federation, is in your best interests, and that the communists' aim to frustrate immediate merger is only for their own communist selfish interests, and that deliberately prolonging the anti-colonial struggle in Singapore, to use Singapore as a communist base from which to undermine the Federation, will bring trouble to all of us. To take immediate action is to lose to the communists in the battle for the people's support. Singapore is a multiracial city with 4 major language groups: the Chinese-speaking, the Malay-speaking, Indian-speaking, and the English-speaking. The Malay-speaking, Indian, and English-speaking groups are quite certain that Lim Chin Siong and his communist friends are up to no good, and consider that they should be put away and not allowed to do mischief. But we have to convince the Chinese-speaking not only that Lim and his friends are communists working under instructions from a communist underground headquarters, but also that what they are doing is not good for all of us in Singapore. We must carry the opinion of all the people, including the Chinese educated. To do this, we must bear in mind 2 things. The first is that to take stern action against the communists, while Singapore is still a semi-colony, with ultimate power still vested in the British, would be to open ourselves to smear and misrepresentation that we are just stooges of the British and have acted to preserve British interests. British power is supreme in Singapore. The sovereignty of Singapore is still vested in the British. In the last resort, it is they who have the final say on what happens to Singapore. We know, and the communists also know, that in the last resort, the British must take action on their own to protect their military and other interests. The communists fear this, and for that reason, their proxies went to see Lord Selkirk, the UK Commissioner, in Woodhull's own words, in order to clarify the situation. The last government under Lim Yu Hock took massive action against the communists. The government failed. They failed not because they had taken action against the communists, but because their action was deliberately misconstrued to the people by the communists as having been done under instigation by the British. As a result, the government lost out. The second thing we have to bear in mind is this. It is unwise to take stern, immediate action against subversion in the unions, cultural organizations, old boys associations, and even in the university student clubs, because the action will be very largely against the Chinese educated who have penetrated the leadership in these unions and associations. Unless there is a clear distinction made between the communists and the non-communists in the Chinese educated world, we would merely create resentment against the government and sympathy for the cause of those detained. We must therefore make clear the distinction between Chinese educated and communists. As Fong Swee-Swan, Chan Chow-Tor, Woodhull, Devannair, and James Puducherry have stated in their letter to me, nearly all communists in Malaya are Chinese educated. But that does not mean all Chinese educated are communists. To purge the communists, we have to be careful that we make it clear that we are not purging the Chinese educated. This is a trap into which we must never fall. The last government fell into the communist trap of allowing themselves to be presented as anti-Chinese culture and anti-Chinese education. When they purged the communist student leaders to immobilize the handful who were responsible for the stay-in strike, they had to flush out of Chinese high school and Chongqing High School thousands of non-communist Chinese educated students. The Labour Front government helped the communists to convince the people that the government had purged Chinese education. We cannot afford to make the same mistake. Hence the vital importance of getting constitutional guarantees on local autonomy for education, which will enable the Chinese to carry on their education from primary school to Nanyang University. Otherwise, the communists will make trouble over this to prevent merger. Our conflict is with the communists, nearly all of whom are in the Chinese educated world. But this does not mean we quarrel with the Chinese educated world, because that is exactly what the communists want us to do. Our duty is to bring the various linguistic groups together to build up a united, tolerant society in which all the races and all the language groups will live in peace. We must give the Chinese educated a fair and equal place in our society and convince them that their best interests lie with the nationalist and democratic side. So, in spite of all the misunderstandings the communists and their supporters are trying to create amongst genuine and sincere Chinese educationists over the recent proposed change in the Chinese middle schools from the present 6-year system of 3 years for junior middle and 3 years for senior middle to a system with 4 years for secondary school certificate plus 2 years for post-school certificate. In spite of all these misunderstandings deliberately created, we have been patient and always open to reason. In this way, we prevent the communists from making people believe that we are anti-Chinese education. And so we can carry with us the support of the neutrals who form the bulk of the people in the Chinese educated world. It is because we have not and are not likely to play into their hands that Lim Chun Siong and his friends know they are in serious trouble. They realize that they have made a grave error of judgment and that they have been taken for a ride by the British. Let me tell you what James Putucherry said about 3 weeks ago, before my series of broadcasts began, to the chairman of a trade union. He said, "I still have a high regard for Devan Nair. Ask him to come and see me. You know, I'm a liberal, but I must stand by them because I know that they are going back to jail." On the 29th of August, at about 10 a.m., nearly a month ago, Dr. Rajakumar of the General Hospital, Kuala Lumpur, went to see Ahmad Ibrahim at his house in Nasim Road. Rajakumar was one of the accused in the Fajar sedition trial, together with Dr. Po Su Kai, the new Assistant Secretary General of Barisan Socialists. I defended them, and we became friends. He had been in Singapore for a few days to look up his friends like Po Su Kai and Woodhull. He asked Ahmad whether he could come and see me. Ahmad said certainly, and offered to arrange a meeting between him and me. But Rajakumar said, "Not this time." He went on to say that the boys, that is, his friends, were very foolish if they think that the communists could run Singapore and the Federation simply keep quiet and do nothing about it. Rajakumar also said, in his own words, there is no solution to this problem except that the boys would all go back to jail. You see, they know that they are in trouble with the British and with the Federation. The question is, how do we, the non-communists, stay out of their trouble? Their objective is to involve us in their trouble and do us the greatest amount of damage in the minds of the people, to paint us as righties, reactionaries, stooges, and a whole host of other abusive terms. Our duty is to show you, the people, that all this trouble is of their own making, and that what they want to do will harm the country and damage our livelihood. In my next talk, I shall tell you how, when the communists saw that we were succeeding in getting merger, they tried to bring the government down to prevent merger.